welcome back to my channel. Today I have for you a Read With Me January edition. Every month I'm going to start highlighting the books that I've read, tell you a little bit about them and what I thought of them, if I would recommend them, if I wouldn't recommend them. So stay tuned and see what I was up to in January. Now, I was a very busy girl in January, reading-wise. I read 9 books this month. Yes, you heard that right, 9 books. I am an avid reader, which I guess you can tell. But I just could not help myself. I found so many good books this month, and there were so many books this month too. So I do keep a book journal. I record everything that I read in my plum paper planners. Offers these journal type bound journal type notebooks. So I do have this pattern. You may notice that it's the same pattern as my actual planner, and I described it in another video. This is another version of it. It's a watercolor pattern. It's in the green, blue, and purple color palette. So let's dive in to see what I read this month. A lot of these books I got from my public library, so they've since been returned because I put a ton of books on hold, and there was one week this month, literally, guys, where I had, 4 or 5 books come up that I had on hold that I was like, oh my gosh, I already have 4 books here. How am I going to read all of these books? But I was waiting for them, so obviously I went and picked them up. The first book that I read this month, and pardon me for looking down, was Me Before You by Jojo Moyes. I loved this book. I saw the movie before I read the book. It's about a girl named Louisa Clark. She used to be a waitress in a cafe, lost her job. She was supporting her family, and her dad had a job, but her mom stayed home with her grandfather that had a stroke. She had a sister that got pregnant while in college. So between the father, Louisa, and her sister, they were all trying to support the family. So she needed to find a new job. Her boyfriend wanted her to become a personal trainer like he was, and that just wasn't her personality. So she ended up going to an employment agency, and they set her up as a home caretaker with a disabled man named Will. If you've not seen the movie or read the book, I will not give away too many details so that I don't spoil it for you. But basically, Will was a healthy man. I believe he's in his 30s. He was healthy and he worked in a firm where they took over companies, they bought out companies and took over them and sold them off piece by piece. So one day on his way to work, he was injured by a motorcycle. He was walking, trying to catch a taxi, and a motorcycle hit him. So he was paralyzed pretty much from the neck down. So he lives with his parents. They run an estate in the town that Louisa lives in. And she and him don't get along at first. They really don't. He is very hard to get along with, very ill-tempered. But they develop some sort of a relationship, and it's a really heartwarming story. I cried at the end. I loved the book. That's all I'm going to talk about it because I don't want to spoil it for anyone. But I would definitely recommend reading it. You should definitely pick it up. I gave it a 5 stars on Goodreads. Then I read the sequel, which is After You by Jojo Moyes. And I gotta say, a lot of people said this book was better than Me Before You. I disagree. I was really disappointed. I hate saying that, but I was really disappointed by this book. I can't really, I mean, I don't want to go into spoiling the end of Me Before You. So let's just say that it picks up on Luisa's life later on. And the story just seems so disconnected. The plot sometimes seemed discombobulated. I just really just didn't care for it. I think I only gave it like 3 stars on Goodreads. I wouldn't say don't read it, but I personally didn't like it. So that's, what I'm going to say about that. I don't want to give too much away because then I will give away the some spoilers to Me Before You. So if you want to, you can check out After You by Jojo Moyes and see what you think. The next book that I read was Find Her by Lisa Gardner. This book was a mystery thriller type book. It's about a girl who was abducted and she survived her attacker. She was abducted and her attacker had her for, I think, I want to say somewhere, I can't remember off the top of my head, about 7 years. So she's kind of like a vigilante now, and there's somebody else that's kidnapping girls in a way that was similar to her abduction. She was held by her captor, kept in like a wooden pine coffin. He was a truck driver and had her in the cab of his truck. He sexually assaulted her. I mean, he literally put this girl through hell. So they're trying to unravel a mystery of these recent kidnappings that were similar to hers. She did go back to her family. She was beyond traumatized, so she was a completely different person. There were parts of this book that I really liked. There were parts of this book that I didn't like. Overall, I gave it a 3.5 stars on Goodreads. It was definitely suspenseful and it definitely kept you guessing, but I ended up being able to figure out pretty easily towards the end who the culprit was and whatnot. And I don't like books like that, to be honest. I like to be surprised. I like to be guessing to the end of the book. And while it was really good in some areas, it started off really slow. And this writer was overly descriptive about everything, I felt. I don't think that she needed to be quite as descriptive as she was about things. So it was a good mystery. It was a good read. Like I said, I gave it about a 3.5 stars. So, I mean, if you want to check it out, check it out. If not, if it doesn't sound like your cup of tea, then probably wise to skip it then. But it is kind of graphic, so be warned. There is detail about the atrocities that were committed against her and whatnot. So the next one that I read was Cinder by Marissa Myers. I absolutely loved this book. This was book 1 of her Lunar Chronicle series. It's pretty much a sci-fi version of Cinderella. It follows a cyborg mechanic named Cinder, and she lives with her stepmother and stepsisters. She is treated pretty badly. She's like a slave, just like the Cinderella story. But she discovers a secret about herself. There's a plague going around the earth. This is set way in the future. And she discovers that she's immune to it. And she discovers why she's immune to it towards the end of the book. But let's just say I fell in love with the characters. It was a very interesting take on Cinderella. I am normally not a sci-fi reader at all. I normally really dislike sci-fi. My husband, however, loves sci-fi, but I don't. Excuse me, my throat's a little dry. So, but I gave this a 5 stars. I would definitely recommend picking this up. It's kind of like Star Wars meets Terminator meets Cinderella. So it's really good. It has a little bit of everything, a little bit of action, a little bit of romance, and then that classic fairy tale story line that you're used to from that story. So I would definitely check it out. The next book that I read was Maybe Someday by Colleen Hoover. This follows the story of a girl who lives with her roommate, and she has a boyfriend. She meets the neighbor across the complex, and he plays the guitar, and she really enjoys the music, and they end up talking, and he asked her to write lyrics to the song that he was playing, because he, is having writer's block. And so she does, and he ends up seeing her boyfriend cheating on her with her friend that she's living with, and the boyfriend and the friend are old friends. So she ends up moving out of the apartment, moves in with him. It details, it's basically a gushy love story. He is deaf, the boy that plays the guitar. But overall, it was a really good story. I enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 stars on Goodreads. I would definitely recommend it. It was my first Colleen Hoover book. I know that she's pretty popular, but I've just never read anything by her. So I enjoyed it. It was a good story. I would definitely recommend checking it out. The next book that I read was Heartless by Marissa Meyer. This is the same woman who authored the Lunar Chronicle series. And this book actually talks about, it's like a spin on Alice in Wonderland, but it is actually about the Queen of Hearts, how she became the Queen of Hearts, her backstory. It was really good. It was very fascinating, very interesting. You get to meet, characters like the Mad Hatter and, things like that, the King of Hearts. It was a very, very good read. It was very interesting how the Queen of Hearts was in this version before she became the Queen of Hearts, and what transformed her into the Queen of Hearts. So I gave this book a definite 5 stars on Goodreads, and I would totally recommend picking it up. I just could not put it down once I started reading it. It's, got action, romance, that kind of thing, and it's very, very interesting, so I would definitely recommend it. The next book that I read was probably my favorite book of the month, and it's probably the best book that I've read in a long time. And this one, it was called The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. It follows Lo Blacklock. She is a reporter for an internet travel site, and her boss ends up having to go on maternity leave, so she's given the chance to show what she can do to try and advance herself in the company. So she's given a chance to write a story, and she takes an assignment that her boss normally would take, and is going on a Norwegian cruise. There are 10 cabins in this boat. They're supposed to be going to different ports. She's going to be seeing different areas. There's a variety of different people. I mean, there's investor type people on the boat. There's photographers. There's another reporter. All there to give opinions about this maiden voyage of this boat. And she is staying in cabin 9. And on her first day, she realizes she didn't pack mascara. So she goes next door to cabin 10, and this woman, gives her, the mascara. She didn't tell her what her name was, this woman that was staying in cabin 10, but she just told her that she could keep it. So later on this night, that night at dinner, she didn't see the woman, asked about who was staying in cabin 10, and they said, well, the person that was supposed to stay there didn't end up making the trip. And later that night, she hears a scream, and she looks out her veranda on her cabin, because each cabin on this boat has a veranda, and she sees a woman go overboard, and there's blood on the glass wall of the veranda looking out over the ocean, and she tries to report it, and nobody believes her. she was burglarized before going on the trip, and she suffers from anxiety and panic attacks, so they think that she's going crazy. This book left me guessing. Like, every time I thought I figured something out, something new would happen. And it was phenomenal. I mean, the ending of this book was just like, I was like, what? This is insane. So I would definitely recommend reading this book. In fact, I recommended it to a friend already, and she's like 50 pages in, and she texted me last night. She's like, oh my God, this book is amazing. So I would definitely recommend picking it up. It's The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. I'm going to be picking up her first book, In the Dark, Dark Wood, today at the library. So I'm really excited to get into that. The next book that I read, I actually still have, I have to return it to the library today, is The Glittering Court by Richelle Meed. She's the author of The Vampire Academy, and what is the other series that she wrote? I don't know what this series is called, but it's the Bloodlines series, I'm guessing. I read both. They were very good. I really like her as an author. This has nothing to do with vampires. The other one, Vampire Academy, obviously had to do with vampires. The Bloodlines series had vampires and werewolves and stuff in it. So this one is about like a dystopian society. It follows a baroness, a young baroness. She's like 18 years old. And she's supposed to marry a distant cousin because her family is broke. Her parents died. It's just her and her grandmother, and she doesn't want to marry this boy. So she is trying to think of a way to get out of it. And there's this boy named Cedric who comes to the house. And, because they're going to be letting all their servants go and whatnot, when she marries her cousin, they're going to go live with him. And so a lot of her household staff's going to get let go. And he comes talking to one of the maids about an opportunity called the Glittering Court. And basically it is common girls that they take and they train them for a year to be like high society people. They give them etiquette lessons and party planning lessons and all of that stuff. It's very like Stepford housewife type stuff. And then they take them over to this land across the sea of new like self-made millionaires and whatnot to be brides for these people. And each year they have a theme, and this year it was jewels, and it follows the story of Adelaide. That's what she names herself. She takes her servant's name, Adelaide, and lets her servant run away because she doesn't want to marry her cousin. And it follows the story of Adelaide and Cedric and her experience of going through the training program and getting over to the new world. And it was really interesting. I gave it, I think, a 3.75 on Goodreads. It was pretty good. I liked it as like an easy read, but I think that her other novels were better, but it was still pretty good. There's a new one coming out I think this month called, I want to say, The Midnight Jewel, so I wouldn't be opposed to reading that one. But that was one of the other books that I read this month. And the last book that I read this month was the second book of the Lunar Chronicles series, Scarlet. I did mention this in my January favorites video. This is by Marissa Meyer. This follows or continues Cinder's story, and she meets new characters. Scarlet, which is based off of Little Red Riding Hood, and they're trying to defeat the Lunar Queen, and she learns that Cinder learns she's the lost Princess Celine. It's very, very good. I gave it a 5 stars. I love this series. I just started the third book yesterday, and I haven't gotten very far. But that is what I am currently reading. For February, I would like to read number 4 in the series, which is Winter. I also have The School of Good and Evil. Let me grab my books really quick and I'll be able to tell you who they're by. Yes, I have a whole pile of books. So I have Crest by Marissa Meyer. This is the 3rd book in the Lunar Chronicles series that I'm reading currently. I would like to also read The School of Good and Evil by Samin Chenani. I'm not sure how to pronounce the name, but I heard this was really good. I would also like to read Winter, which is book number 4 in the Lunar Chronicles series by Marissa Meyer. Then I also have The Girls by Emma Cline, which was recommended to me by a friend, so I'm hoping to get this read. And Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. And then the last book that I'm hoping to read this month is In the Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth Ware. So if you enjoyed this book, or this video, I'm sorry, or I don't know where my mind is today. If you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up so I know you'd like me to make more of these. If you're new here, please hit the red subscribe button down below. And until next month, I will see you later. Happy reading.